There's no way around it. I cannot fall in love with the iMac design. It's been out for a few weeks now. I've stared at it for many hours. And yes, I have decided deep down in my heart that I cannot get around that chin or the white bezels. But I'm still the Apple sheep, and I know many of you want me to say some nice things about the iMac, and I do have a couple nice things to say about the iMac now that the disappointment has set in and I've kind of come to terms with it. I wanted to talk a bit more about the things that I'm glad they did with this updated iMac. There's not much. Let's begin. I think the primary one I will give Apple credit for is the pricing, okay? Because honestly, this is something I did not expect Apple to do, especially if you guys have been watching my videos for a while. You knew the hype I had leading up to the iMac refresh. You knew how excited I was about getting a redesign and how pumped I was that the iMac, which had not really changed from the front for over 10 years, was finally getting an update, and I was expecting that along with that update there would be some type of price hike. I was anticipating the 24-inch iMac to start maybe closer to $1,800 or $2,000, just because there would be so many new manufacturing techniques and so many different retoolings at the factory that they would have to apply, because it would be so different from the previous generation iMac we've had for almost a decade now. And to their credit, they really didn't change the price much. In fact, it stayed essentially the same, with the base model starting at $1,300, and you can configure it higher, of course, if you want. And something we learned once the pre-order period opened up for the iMacs that I thought was kind of cool was that even though that base model only has 2 Thunderbolt ports on the back, no additional USB-C ports, and it doesn't come with a Touch ID keyboard or Ethernet within the power brick, I still can't get over the fact that iMacs have power bricks now. The Mac Mini, no, they can fit that power supply internally, but the iMac, no, we gotta pump that thing out. I know it's got a display and everything, but regardless, you can actually add the Ethernet to that base model for an additional $30, which is kind of cool. And if you go into the keyboard section at checkout, you can opt for a Touch ID equipped Magic Keyboard for only an additional $50. So essentially for $80, you can gain a lot of that I/O back on that $1,300 model, which I'm anticipating because so many of you are saying, you know, it's colorful, and because it's the base model, that means it's okay that it's ugly, and that's why it comes in so many different color options. It's because this is the reception desk iMac, right? This is what people are going to be seeing the back of quite often, and that's why they put so much time and energy into making the side and back views look quite good, which I will agree. If we pretended that the front of this iMac didn't exist for a second and that there was no chin or white bezels, and that's just how the iMac looked from the side and from the back, I would agree. It is quite gorgeous. In fact, embracing those color options and seeing the iMac from behind is quite appealing to me. And while I almost never look at my iMac from the side, seeing those side profile angles is very impressive. The fact that they can stuff an entire computer, especially one with the M1 chip, which is extremely powerful and absolutely 100% an upgrade in terms of graphics and processing power over the last 4K iMac that this one is replacing. That's fantastic that we can build devices that thin and light now, because it allows us to make them so portable and it's easy to throw it in the back. Oh wait, no. Okay, ignore the portability argument. Just praise the thinness for the sake of thin. Yeah, that's right. I'm glad that it looks cool from the side angles. I'm very happy about that. I'm also happy to see Apple embracing having other Type-C ports that aren't Thunderbolt 3. I know that it's probably unrealistic to assume that Apple's gonna have 6 Thunderbolt ports on the next generation iMacs, but just the fact that they're Type-C, I mean, is a win in my book, because that's the superior port. And no, they're not full speed, but it's probably safe to say that, yeah, a lot of people buying this type of iMac, someone who wants a desktop to be in a pretty color palette and is just using it for basic Zoom calls and not really doing anything too power intensive, yeah, they're probably not going to appreciate having 3 or 4 Thunderbolt ports. Those extra Type-C ports are likely just going to go towards, you know, charging devices, and it still confuses me that the updated Magic Keyboard and Magic Mouse are still rocking Lightning. If Apple's willing to switch to Type-C on the back, why not also switch to Type-C on the accessories while you're at it? That way the cable can plug in either way. I mean, they're willing to update the color options on these keyboards and mice now, so they're definitely retooling at the factory and adding now this Touch ID sensor, which I will say I've wanted for a long time, and I'm very happy they're actually bringing that to the market. I'm very curious how much they're going to cost if one day they start selling those keyboards separately. It sounds like it might be a while, because Touch ID and the Magic Keyboard will only work with M1 equipped Macs. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, the iPad Pro has an M1 now, so what What if you could unlock that via Touch ID with that keyboard? Then you have an iPad with Face ID and Touch ID. Ooh, that sounds kind of dope, but it probably isn't gonna happen. Either way though, the fact that the iMac line is finally getting biometrics, I can appreciate, and I'm glad they introduced. And on top of that, without really increasing the price of the iMac lineup very much. Yeah, the specs on that base model are not very good, but for the market that this iMac is going after, which in my opinion is somewhat niche, I think the idea of the family computer is kind of dying off in the age of iPads and iPhones. In schools, in classrooms, are more inclined to buy mobile devices so that they can turn any classroom into a computer lab, and also have devices that are good for distance learning these days. So the idea of buying a whole fleet, a whole classroom full of iMacs with wireless keyboards and mice that the students can pick up and put in their pockets and run off with, I don't think that's going to be a common trend. I mean, there are some richer schools and richer universities that buy up whole fleets of iMacs, but honestly, I think they would rather wait for the 32-inch iMacs coming later, or rather opt for Mac Minis that are going to be cheaper and they can use pre-existing monitors they already have a bunch of. But regardless, on top of that, the pricing for the fact that you're getting a 4.5K monitor, and if your primary directive with getting a screen is having a high-resolution display and you don't really care about chins in bezels, then the 24-inch iMac is somewhat an amazing deal, in my opinion, because to get a M1 equipped Mac Mini, that's going to be about $700, and to only have $600 to spend on a 4K monitor, yeah, there's some out there, but of course that's going to take up some more cables, that's going to take up some more power supply, and it's probably not going to have as great a speaker system as the 24-inch iMac has. So someone who's interested in getting a bigger display and still wants the power of the M1, but they don't have to worry about getting separate speakers and having a separate Mac Mini from a monitor and an HDMI cable going between the two, this is very much that core vision of plug and play, which I can appreciate. That's the primary reason I've been such a big fan of iMacs for years, and the reason I still use one to this day is because how simple and clean of a setup it is. And I do find it pretty impressive they were able to redesign the entire iMac and also improve the speaker quality, simultaneously finally giving it a 1080p webcam. That took way too long, but I'm glad that the upgrade is there. I can appreciate that for sure, and keeping the price points pretty much the same with the 4K iMac that this one is replacing, I applaud Apple for doing, and a lot of people seem to disagree with me and love the iMac design. For those people out there, I am happy for you. I wanted to love this iMac design. I would just be kidding myself if I said that I could get comfortable with that and I was used to the front. There's a reason the industry ditched white bezels, especially when you're trying to color correct photos and videos. It throws off everything depending on the lighting and your environment. This video is not backpedaling. I still stand by everything I said in my rant video. I'm just trying to acknowledge that there are some things I like. I appreciate that the stand is included. For the past year, I was really worried that Apple was gonna go kind of the Pro Display route and decide to make the iMac compatible with the Pro stand, which means that you have to buy a $1,000 stand for your redesigned iMac. They didn't do that. In fact, this is the first time the stand for the iMac has actually gotten an updated design in over a decade, even before the most recent generation iMacs, where the last refresh was 2012. Even those had pretty much the same basic stand as the iMacs before them, and these ones are updated and included, and they're not height adjustable, which sucks, but you can pivot the display a bit, and the fact that they include that with each purchase is appreciated. And it's funny to me how many people keep asking me how I would feel about white bezels coming back to MacBooks and MacBook Pros after I keep telling everyone that I hate white bezels. I always have hated white bezels, and I always will hate white bezels. They make the black line between the display and the border more noticeable. They're not good for color correcting. The display naturally turns black when it's off, which makes the white border even more noticeable, and yet you're all asking me how I feel about white bezels coming to more devices? What do you think I'm gonna say? Is that a shocker to you? Is that a mystery? Whatever the product is, I don't care what you're asking about, I'm anti-white bezels. I hope that can be known and applied moving forward, okay? I don't care what product, iPhone, iPad, I don't want white bezels on anything, okay? I don't care if it's the base model, I don't care if it's the cheap model and it's meant to be affordable. If a product ditches white bezels, I consider that a win. That's a step forward. That's why I liked the second generation iPhone SE. That's why I loved the iPad Pros and the iPad Air refreshes. They ditched those in favor of going all in on the black border, which is a good move. So anytime a product goes away from black bezels and exclusively to white, I consider that a downgrade. But anyway, that's not the point of this video. All I'm trying to say is, if you're interested in the new iMac and you ordered one and you're comfortable with that design language, which I'm happy for you. I hope it works well for you. I'm grateful that the prices seem somewhat reasonable, and I'm pretty confident that whatever market this iMac is catering towards, the M1 is going to be plenty for you, and I'm glad to see Touch ID brought to these Macs as well. I want that to be brought to the entire lineup so that biometrics are both a desktop and laptop thing. I'm happy about the webcam upgrades, the speaker upgrades, and I'm very curious to check out the performance on mine, because the only M1 chip I've ever reviewed did not have fans built in, so now I'm gonna have an M1 chip that has, you know, an actual thermal architecture to cool the chip down, so maybe it'll perform way better. We'll see. Anywho, let me know what you guys like about the redesigned iMac, whether or not you're getting one down below. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.